platforms, not all. And again, I keep saying this throughout all the rooms, to each his or her own, because I have a TikTok, but I'm not active in it, and I didn't get that feeling from TikTok. And from what I hear, they all sell your information. Fine. But certain places that I won't go because, even as an author, I don't do a lot of Amazon sales. I don't do any Amazon sales. I have a Shopify store. I have a storage place for my products. I have a deal with the USPS, and you pay a certain amount, and they'll come right to your house and pick up whatever your products are. So we need to know the whole scope of what's going on in order to, not leave any money on the table. So I guess to answer your question, you pick and choose what platform feels comfortable to you. And most of my research, I do YouTube versus. So Telegram versus WhatsApp, or, and it'll pull up different examples. But yes, we want to utilize every platform that we can get the word out. But most importantly, we want to have our own domain, our own website, running traffic from the other platforms to our domain. So once we get the intro, I will probably, if we have people for our next session that may have, how are we going to do that, Vashawn? Just take it room by room?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So we have a group of people who started a podcast last week, and
Okay.
then a group that are starting today. So are we just going to go from here and just, follow up and see if we can go to the next step?
Yeah, let's schedule one more part, a part 3. And then I would say that if you have some people who, a small group of people who are seriously interested, in going really deep, I would say then it would be time to, start your own podcasting community, on the app. If there's some people that are really genuinely interested and they want to get into the weeds, they want to share information, everything that goes along with, podcasting. So that's what I would say. So are you available to do this again same time next week?
Absolutely.
What you say, Paji?
Yes, ma'am. Count me in.
Okay, let me pick temperature. Like I really, really know that I genuinely want to get into podcasting. The fresh market, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm driving looking for this place. I really want to get into podcasting. I know that it's important, and but there's so much because we haven't even talked about it. And that may be something I might schedule, is talking about the AI tools that you can use, for podcasting, like how to clean up your audio, all those kinds of things, right? So we didn't even get into any of that. But is there anyone in here, whether you're in the audience or you're on the stage, that have a sincere interest in starting and launching your own podcast? Sherelle? Okay. All right. Sounds good.
See,
Yeah. So let's keep, I probably will not do rooms, even if we're not doing a podcasting room. I'm going to start, maybe I'll have like a little Google form I'll start throwing up so people can fill out. Because I think once you have about 4 or 5 people, then that would be like a good little group to really grow with. So I'm definitely down. Sherelle's down. Sherelle, can you do me a favor? Can you back channel Podgy to make sure that y'all are, connected, and he can reach back out to you so he can make sure he can reach out to you directly. So all right. Okay. So did that answer your question, Podgy?
Yes,
Hey,
ma'am.
Noel and Jella, I didn't get to say hello to you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, those are a lot of things that we want to get into. And we didn't want to get too deep because, I mean, it's free game, but it's us making each other great. You know, it takes a network, you know. So building that network, we need to know all the building blocks. We need to know how to get into the top 5%, you know, and how to get in the top 25%, you know. So we're going to continue and, you know, like she said, back channel me, let me know if, even if you're not totally convinced, you still need some more courses or some more eye-opening moments. But back channel me and we'll continue next week. And I can answer any questions that anybody might have because I don't like to just get on here and just be spitting out information. And, you know, I need to know what the temperature is. So if y'all have any questions right now, I'm here.
So what would stop? I get. So I like this platform. I do. I think the biggest value of this platform, my phone probably gonna hang up, but the biggest platform is that it's new, and I think that's the biggest value that this platform has the app that it has to offer is the fact that it's not saturated right now. Like Clubhouse was the exact same, as this platform, and for whatever reason, it kind of blew up for whatever reason. And I just think this platform can do the exact same thing. I think if you have a following, it's great. I think all these platforms is that if you have a following and maybe trying to create the following from the people that's already on the platform.
I think his phone might have died. Um, yeah, absolutely. What he said, and Rashawn, Clubhouse had has like 10 million users, you know, and this is less than a million. I feel like one of the main assets is these audio rooms that are already pretty much set up like a podcast. So the network is within us already. We just gotta hit the channels and make it pop.
Yeah, absolutely. And eventually, Fanbase will have recorded rooms. So definitely, I'm channeling, you know, to a podcast, uh, or repurposing the content for podcasting is going to be more easily available. I mean, you can do it now if you record on your own, but it's obviously, you know, not the easiest. So yeah, no, absolutely. I think, what if a question that I have is just really, I guess, if you can kind of walk me down quickly, like what are the ways? I think I asked this last time. We didn't get into it too much. But and I do know a little bit, but I'm just kind of interested from your perspective. Is like, what are all the ways you can monetize your podcast? You know, obviously there's viewership, but then there's other or listenership. Um, there's other ways, such as having your podcast sponsored, right? Like, because some people think like they have to have a huge audience to monetize, but you may be very niche down in a particular market, a particular segment, and there's a potential partnership that someone finds valuable because you are definitely in their target. uh, so do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure, there's several ways that you can podcast, you know, and I'll say again to each his or her own. You can have as little as 100 listeners and strike a deal with an advertiser that, you know, for example, um, Little Caesars Pizza, you know, you have your marketing people talk to them, let them know about your platform. We can strike a deal or make a contract that's pay per clicks. I'll just use that as an example. You're not out of any money out of your company until our podcast blows up to the point where then we'll have to charge you for ads. But we'll play, you know, on an entry level you know, and of course you're going to have plans on building and showing them quarter by quarter. Okay, we had 100 listeners. All right, next quarter we have 200 listeners. All right, by the end of the year we've got 1,000 listeners, which um, that puts you in a 25% ratio. So when people are looking up podcasts, oh, this is in the top 25%. So you're not only scaling up with the company that you got to deal with, but as going into these rooms, like I said, you know, Spotify, Twitch, whoever, they see you scaling up and you go from 1,000 to 10,000, then they're really paying attention to you. So you could strike a deal with Little Caesars Pizza that at the beginning it might not be nothing far as profits in your pocket, but as your podcast scales up, you can scale it up to Little C's paying you $5,000 a month for that ad that they believed in you and you made a deal. And as you're growing, you're helping them grow too. Because on your podcast, of course, um, in urban podcasting, $1 million worth of game is probably the most. Uh, they get the most money out of all the urban podcasters. They have a spot. They usually do a 2-hour podcast. Now you see $1 million worth of game on YouTube, so they're going to get YouTube money. So the money they get off of that, they're getting million views on a lot of their stuff. So that million views is going to get you $4,000 to $7,000 per video. They do probably a couple videos a week. So they're monetized there on YouTube, and then they're part of Barstool, which I don't know if y'all heard of Barstool. They have a podcast network. They got an 8-figure deal with Barstool, and $1 million worth of game is also on Black Effect Network. So they're getting checks from the same podcast from 3 different big accounts. And then I'm sure you guys have heard Earn Your Leisure. So Earn Your Leisure, the Joe Buttons podcast, they all do shows on the road. They do their podcasts on the road. So Earn Your Leisure, they have Invest Fest in Atlanta. I think it's the 3rd year. Last year they sold 1,200 seats for $10,000 a seat. Another avenue for monetization. That's $12 million counted.
Hey, Alex, I was going to ask you a question. So, for podcasting, since it's about listening time, how what's considered a standard listening time before it gets counted? You know what I mean? Like views, but I know it's different for listening. Do you have to listen so many seconds or a minute? How does that?
Yes, ma'am. It's 1 minute. In order for
Oh,
them to know that your podcast isn't, being watched by a bot, a human has to touch play. When they touch play and if you think about it, most of these podcasts, the first minute of the podcast is an intro song and them saying who they are. A lot of times you're hearing music, then you're already counted as a listener, and you really didn't listen to the whole podcast, but they're getting the credit for it. Just one.
that's dope because my intro is a minute. I appreciate that.
And that's some of the things that, I call it the boot camp. You need to know the analytics, need to know the data behind it. You need to know the company that actually administers it's called the IAB. So I'm not going to get into all of that. I want to, like Vashawn said, we need at least 4 people that we can take on to the promised land. Y'all with me?
I already said I had my hand up last week, but yeah, I would prefer podcasting. I was looking into Spotify, so let's do it. Because I figure if you have a book, this would be a good way to segment your books. You could do like a, what would you say, a chapter maybe? That might be too long. You could like read a chapter and then, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I was and I'll give a lot of podcasts for you guys to go and check out on en route to what we call market research. You know what I'm saying? Me as an author, with you saying that, I want you to check out a podcast. It's called the Sell More Books podcast. You find it on all platforms. Sell More Books. They got close to 500 episodes, and I would start at the most recent episode that they have because you know how the book industry changes. You know what I'm saying? So it's it's a wealth of knowledge. 500 plus episodes. Start right at the beginning, and then you can work your way back. You'll never see all 500 episodes, of course, but those are the type of episodes. I mean, those are the type of podcasts. I don't have a lot of time to take in other people's podcasts, but I will, if it's beneficial to the movement of my company. So Earn Your Leisure, I've been tapped in with them. I actually found my merch mentor through Earn Your Leisure, and he's a young dude from Houston. He's like 27. He make close to $1 million a month merchandising. But you're absolutely right. Maybe chapter by chapter, depending on how long your book is. You can go to these crime podcasts where they're telling crime stories, and if you wanted to do an autobiography of yourself, you can call the podcast Self and put your name on it. And then, it's a lot to titling and descriptions, but you can start talking about your life from the beginning and have other people come in, talk about their lives, and, call it Self. There's an idea for a podcast for you, go
Hey,
ahead and trademark.
as a quick suggestion, because in regards to like promoting your book, I would suggest doing a live stream on YouTube or Facebook. You don't have to do a full chapter, just do maybe a few paragraphs, and this way you can evergreen that video and content so you can promote it here or YouTube or Facebook later down the line. There's a guy named Julian Gordon who kind of does the same thing promoting his book, and he pretty much bumped all his sales from January last year to the end of December, maybe six figures worth of books. So this is a suggestion.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Um, I have a partner that wrote a book um, probably about 2 years ago, and he was putting chapters in his story in Facebook and other spots, just pictures of a couple of the pages. He would do it every day for like 6 months. Yeah. So um, my my main thing, like, I have an MBA in publishing, so I'm a published author as well. That's why I was speaking on Amazon. Being the bullies that they are, they take up 60% of the writing industry, forcing people with exclusive deals with them. Like I said, I can have the post office come to my house today and pick up 10 books. They might charge me $1 per book, So these are all the things that we need to know. I go out to Vegas every year, every fall for the past 6 years. I'm part of a writing company, probably 300 authors. Some of them have Tubi movies, some of them have movies on Roku, New York Times best-selling authors. So it all ties in together, and it's pretty much, it looks like a sales funnel, and the podcast is a big part of it.
A question, LFX: have you given out any starter kits for the podcasting in regards to like the equipment and things like that? Have you done that yet?
No, actually, I want podcasters to have the mindset of, I'm on the iPhone 14 right now talking to y'all. Um, we know for audio and visual, that's what they're made for. So if you're able to be consistent enough to podcast daily, and it don't have to be more than 10 minutes. We talk all day long. Why not push record? You know what I'm saying? So I'm teaching from the ground level without purchasing anything. And that's what I did. And that's why I'm going back. When I got on Anchor in 2018, I just did it on my with my iPhone. And all of those podcasts are counting towards downloads or whatever. But I want to start from the basics, and then we'll build up all the way to making your own podcast studio where you can rent your studio out for $100 an hour. You can do your own podcast. You can have other people simultaneously doing podcasts. Then you can have people renting out spaces within your building. So we start at the ground level and we'll build all the way up. Yeah, so we won't hit publish until we got like at least a 5-10 minute piece with our intros, and publishing is the last thing you do.
Okay. Good.
But definitely I would like to, and honestly it doesn't have to be 4 people. If I got one person that's interested in taking this journey for like a 365 challenge. Let's podcast every day. Let's talk every Saturday. Pull up some Zooms, share screens, podcast news, or even podcasts on that Saturday together. And through Spotify Podcaster, when you hit that record button, it'll show you where you can invite someone else. So that's one of the most important assets of being a podcaster. You bring in another audience onto your platform that has a following, or maybe they don't have a following, but that's pretty much the formula to scaling up. You want to have guests. So Spotify podcaster makes it as easy as boom, ping you right into the room. As soon as that person comes into the room, it starts recording. As soon as that person comes into the room, you start your podcast. Now, if you say some things at the beginning that you want to trim off, it's as easy as just seconds. You go into the library, you see that saved content, you hit edit and scrape it off from the intro to the outro, and publish.
Okay, so that brings another question. Suppose you have so much content already, like audio, would it be a way to like pre-record it to upload and treat it as if it was live and do it that way?
Yep, you hit the import button when you get to your tools. You should see that import button up at the top right hand. It'll say import.
Ooh, man.
You can import audio that you've already done and save it in your library, and you might import uh 5 or 6, let's say 7 files, and you take all of those files and you can have an intro for every podcast. That's why I was saying do the intro, and you don't have to make your intro every time. You play the intro and then go into the file or whatever session that you're talking about. That's why we do the intro.
Yeah. And then probably an outro at the end.
Exactly. You don't gotta practice, you don't gotta remember what you say. And when I did it, when it was Anchor, they had us do a trailer. But at that time, they we were dropping ads in between our content. So let's say you got 4 or 5 minute audios. Between those, you might could put 2 ads, and they'll play an ad every time somebody listens to your podcast. But now they changed it since Spotify bought them out. Now they're making it more geared towards subscriptions, which is good for the creators because it's a balanced attack for you to know, Like, all right, are you familiar with Amanda Seals' podcast? Another one for you to follow, Amanda Seals. She's a comedian. She tours with her podcast, and of course, she does stand up, but she has a radio show that's syndicated, and she turned that into a podcast. If you follow Amanda Seals on Instagram, every night she's going live doing her podcast portion, and they just drop songs in and make it a radio show, and she's syndicated, getting money all over the country.
So, Paji, I do have one more question. Can you speak to the benefits of podcasting outside of monetizing? Like, even if you don't want to monetize, what are the other opportunities that having a podcast can bring you?
Well, I think uh, we have so many empowering women and empowering men that um, you know through nonprofit sources we can reach out, and through for-profit sources we can reach out as well. But if you're just interested in making a difference in our community, in our society, podcasting, there's a thing called Listen Notes. Listen Notes has pretty much all of the podcasts that are registered. It's close to 4 million podcasts out there. And you can go in Listen Notes and check different metadata and different things. You can check your own podcast. But my mission statement as an author, my mission statement is freeing oppressed minds with the literary pen. So my goal is to show people who are oppressed how to tell their story. So that's why I went to Vegas and got my MBA in publishing. So I can empower people to tell their stories. I believe it was Bill Clinton. He said every U.S. citizen should have a biography by the time they get to be 50 years old in the form of a book. So at the time he said it, boom, we're talking about books. But uh, a question was just asked about actually making a book a podcast. So if you have a story to tell that's going to help someone, you can do that podcast and not worry about the money. And especially, you probably would want to set up a nonprofit that's it'll still be supported in that avenue. But yeah, just getting the word out. Podcasting is it.
Okay, I lied. One more question. Can you speak to the different types of way that people do podcasts? Or I know there are storytelling podcasts, like for instance, where people just listen to people tell stories, or read stuff. I mean, I've heard that. I've also, you know, you have those podcasts from platforms such as Instagram. Um, yeah. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Are you guys familiar with Jamil Hill from ESPN Unbothered? She has a podcast network. She actually had one of the hottest shows on ESPN for the longest. And ESPN did ESPN thing, you know, which I always I'm promoting having your own platform. And then that way your speech isn't monitored. People aren't telling you what you can and can't say because they're a sponsor of yours. And if you the least you worry about sponsorship, the more you can be free to say what you want to say. So that is a good question. How else can we get out there and podcast? But uh, her, what's her name? Issa Rae, who's the ambassador of the film festival we're going to in Miami. She had a podcast after Insecure. There was a podcast that talked about the Insecure episodes. So you can form a podcast around a show, you know. Jamil Hill, the one I just talked about with uh, Undisputed, not Undisputed, Unbothered. She had a podcast just going back and talking about The Wire and your favorite episode and things like that. So you can podcast in the form of uh, an autobiography. You can podcast in the form of reaching out to um, communities from books, uh, Pokemon, whatever it is that you're interested in. You can form a community around it and make a podcast.
I was just gonna say it's so creative based that there's nothing that's off limits to me. It just seems like whatever you can think of, you can actually do it with this podcasting. So I'm all for it. But I wanted to ask, what about suppressing content? Is that a thing to be worried? Like as far as like making it to be adult only, or kind of how YouTube has it to where you probably don't want to curse or you can't use derogatory.
Yeah, there's disclosures and depending on the platform. uh what I know about YouTube, they're controlled by bots. So is Facebook controlled by bots. So on YouTube, the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes, they're listening for cuss words, they're listening for copyright infringement, but they can't. It's 10 years worth of video on YouTube. There's no way anyone would be able to watch everything. So, of course, they're controlled by the bots. But that's why I promote, your own, like, for example, what I was talking about, Amanda Seals. She's a comedian. She's touring as a comedian. She has a podcast that's cut out of her radio show. So really, the radio show is built around her podcast. She podcasts at night, and she has a syndication deal with several stations across the country, and they just play their regional music. You know what I'm saying? Which is pretty interesting. It's dope to be able to get money on that type of level.
I wanted to ask your opinion on something. Hello to everyone in the room. I know you said about getting your own and not having to worry about sponsorship and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on like crowdfunding or something like that? Things of that nature to raise funds towards a project or your podcast in this regard.
Yeah, always you want to have an email list, because people think that, okay, I have a cause, I can just put it up, and people will buy into it. That's kind of how it works, but at the same time, you have to have a community behind you.
Right.
So in those steps that you're taking towards crowdfunding, I think is great. Patreon, if you really look at it, is an interesting type of crowdfunding. And Amanda Seals, she's one of the examples. When you go to Patreon, her Patreon is the example they use to teach people, the best route to go. So it's genius, the crowdfunding. I have a Patreon. The beginning level was something small. I just hope you appreciate my content. I have a radio station. Along with the radio station, on the bottom tier, I offer some exclusive podcasts. And that's where, I guess, if that answers your question, that's the route you want to take. Patreon, I got exclusive content. Um, it ain't like no OnlyFans or whatever, but it's stuff that for my sweat equity, um, you're gonna appreciate that I made the content up just for you. So that's the bottom tier. The middle tier is kind of like a networking, we bring together on Sundays on Zoom. And then the third tier of my Patreon is actually ad space on my radio station. So there's a lot of creative ways you get out there and get it, but you know, we ain't trying to leave no money on the table.
Thank you for that.
For sure. And I just thank you, Angela, for your compliment. Um, the let me play something for y'all. And I said I was gonna play this. Um, it's a it's a 1 minute. I had it queued up since we've been on here. It's a 1 minute and a half piece. It's Combat Jack, and he's the Podfather. Like, he passed on. He died from cancer, and he was the one that I said was Jay-Z's lawyer, Puffy's lawyer, all the bad boy producers. So here is the beginning where he transformed from a lawyer, an entertainment lawyer, to a podcast. So listen to this 1 minute, if you will. Hold on, my speaker switched. Yeah, I got a whole setup up here done switched into the speaker but I'm gonna put that on in a second. But I mean, any more?
No, no questions. But doubling back to what you were saying about Jamil Hill, I follow her on Twitter, and I've been listening to her podcast for a while, and I love it. Didn't she win it? She won something for her podcast, didn't she? An award.
Yeah, she did. She's naturally a journalist. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And,
yeah,
and and that's what I am. So I appreciate her as well. But
yeah. I actually met her in Atlanta a few years ago at a New Year's party. She's a really, really sweet woman.
yeah, she good people. She had the #1 show on ESPN, and because she was boisterous about how she felt about Trump, they got her up out of there. But
I remember that.
her being the journalist, they said, we're not going to fire you. We're just going to put your face off the camera and put you back to work as a journalist. She's like, that's what I am naturally. I didn't want to be in front of the uh, the camera.
Right, you look like you doing me a favor.
This is my forte. So let me have it. And she now has her own network where she's does things, but they always try to trip us up, you know. But if you know all the rules and you make them play by your rules, then you know there's like it's certain in the music business. I was watching Shay Shay. Look at what Shay Shay done did, Uncle Shay. Another podcast to check out. Uh, he got 500,000 extra subscribers after that Cat Williams
Just
situation.
off of Cat Williams, yeah.
500,000 subscribers. So let's do that 3%. 3% of them is going to spend some money with me. You know what I'm saying? And it's not
Right.
always about money, but you just have to know those things. And he, his last interview I watched a couple of days ago, I really hadn't watched a lot of Shay Shay because I don't have time. But when this stuff is trending, it's important for me to know as a podcaster. He had 21 Savage on there, one of the last interviews. And 21 Savage, he was platinum before he even got a deal. So when it came to time to get the deal, he was able to discuss a 70-30 with the with the label. Who does that? If you're not Master P or a baby.
Yeah, 21 had a nice little strategy. Um, I'm not a big fan of his music. I mean, he's getting better, but I wasn't a fan of his music at first. But he definitely had a definite good platform.
Yeah, he's a lot of the guys in Atlanta. Um, they had nice runs. I mean, Future is 40 years old. You know that?
Yep.
These dudes had nice runs and still performing and still getting 100,000, 200,000. But look at Nori. He was given the game, and he got podcaster awards the last 2 3 years. He was given the game by Leor Cohen, him daddy, that him daddy. Nori, another podcaster. We didn't talk about Drink Champs on here. Uh, Nori
That Kanye Drink Champs was something else.
viral. He did it twice.
Yes, not
Hit a
once,
million
twice.
twice. But the way Nori handled it, I'm probably would have did it a little different. But Nori gets money from Mass Appeal, which is Nas. He gets a check from Jay-Z on Rock Nation. He gets a check from YouTube, of course. And who's the president of YouTube Music? Leor Cohen. And he's on Revolt. And Nori's on Black Effect Network. So your one podcast is getting you 7, 8 checks. And he dropped out in the fifth grade. Yeah, and Joe Buttons, he's the number one urban uh, personality, but he just doesn't have any personality. So he kind of he gets in his he gets in his own way every time. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And nothing against white folks, but yeah, he's funny. He signed a deal with Amazon. I don't know if you guys heard of Amp.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, that deal, him and Nicki Minaj, they signed podcasts and deals with AMP, which that's not Amazon's emphasis. So, I mean, of course, if they wanted to be the number one social media network, they could, because they got more information from us than anybody.
Mm.
But that deal, somehow, I guess they didn't want to move forward with AMP. So, kind of left Joe and Nikki hanging. But the idea he had was a podcast called For the Lovers or something like that. Where he's just doing he's an R&B head, but he was just aiming at rock, R&B pop, whatever, just talking about music, which I thought was pretty ingenious idea because he was already doing that. When they would play their songs at the end, this is an extension of that. He created a podcast off of a podcast. DJ, what you munching?
Man, my bad. I didn't even know my mic was on. I'm not eating.
Yeah, I hear you.
I was I'm about to make a smoothie, and I was
Okay,
making sure my
busting it down, huh?
my blades was moving right on this NutriBullet that I'm using.
Okay. Yeah, and also to let you know, my my music platform for my radio station, I have slots for 20 DJs that I could actually turn into 20 slots for podcasters as well.
Wow.
The whole platform is set up like I've only been on this platform since August of last year, because before that I had a video platform and it was costing way too much to operate it. And seeing, I was trying to get like old classics, Good Times, Sanford and Son, whatever played, but it's millions of dollars to get them type of contracts. So
Oh wow.
it has to be off of your own content. So I'm
Right.
like, off of my own content, I can pay um, a quarter of what I was paying monthly to maintain the video platform, get the audio platform that will allow podcasts and DJs. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting out there and getting some quality content this year. We got so far in Houston, made the playoffs. I'm in Houston, by the way, Texas.
Oh, okay.
Made Texans made the playoffs. We had the college football championship here. Final Four was here in April. Houston popping. So as a
Oh yeah.
content creator, matter of fact, when I go to the Miami Film Festival, I'm going down with a piece of equipment called the Pod Track, made by Zoom. It has 4 channels, and I'm going to have the microphone hooked up where it has